name is David Stillwell. I'm a lecturer in Big Data and Quantitative Social Science.
What findings in your research did you expect?
I was surprised how accurate it was. We then did a follow-up study and we found that it was even more accurate than someone's friends, even someone's family predicting a person's personality. On the other hand, I wasn't that surprised because if you do talk to someone for an hour and you tell them, all your favourite things, what you like to do as a hobby, where you like to go and eat and things like that, then actually you're giving away quite a lot of information. So Facebook makes it quite fun to share your Facebook likes and to share things with your friends, but some of that information is quite personal.
What findings in the field of personality and big data do you think will be applied shortly?
So the big thing from my research is that now you can predict people's psychometric results just by existing data. So it's very easy for companies and for individuals themselves to just share data, press a button, and to have predictions made about them. And then companies can apply that in areas where they were never able to use psychology before.
Could you give us an example of how individuals might benefit from personality and big data?
So previously there was no way to get someone to fill in this personality questionnaire just to get personalized adverts. But now that can be done automatically in milliseconds. So probably advertising was where it would be used first, just because Google, that's where Facebook, they all get their money from advertising and it's such a big business. But hopefully it'll be used in more kind of personal ways as well in future. So perhaps the next thing will be dating, and then in future anywhere where you've got a person and a product and you're trying to match them together.
Where can we see big data produce major improvements in the field of psychological research?
The interesting thing for research is to get information that previously we'd have to ask people over and over again. For example, how happy are you? Depression. People aren't depressed all the time. It sort of comes and goes in spikes. And so actually, in order to understand depression, either you have to ask people every 10 minutes, are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling depressed? Are you feeling depressed? Or if we can automatically infer that kind of information, then in future we might get better understanding of what's happening on a minute-to-minute basis. Is it, you've met a friend and therefore depression's gone away and you've had a fun conversation? What is it that's actually going on in people's lives minute to minute that affects their psychology?
What should we take into account when analyzing psychological findings based on big data?
So the disadvantage with big data in general is that it tends to be correlational. So we watch what millions of people do, we then find correlations between behavior and psychology, and then we assume that that's telling us something useful. I think the best way to use big data is as sort of in combination with more traditional approaches that are still used in psychology. So experimental approaches where you're putting people into groups, and one group's a control group and one group's got some experimental effect, and then you're seeing what effect that has on people. So then you've got the big data is telling you, well, here's what millions of people are doing day to day, and then the experiment is telling you that this is a cause and result, this actually means something psychologically, this affects what people do.
What value remains for conventional testing when the accuracy of, for example, Facebook likes generated predictions are so high?
That's a really good question. So one interesting finding we have from people who get their personality predicted from their Facebook data is they then say, well, this doesn't match my personality. And the answer to that is often that, okay, that may not be how you act in real life, but this is the way that you're presenting yourself online to your friends. So that has meaning in that online context, but that doesn't necessarily match what you're doing in your real life. So a questionnaire approach can then allow you to compare the two. So what am I like online? What am I like among my friends? And then you can see if there are differences there. Maybe you're acting in different ways in different situations, which you wouldn't be able to understand necessarily if you were just using the online big data approach.
Would that mean that we are not the same person in the offline as we are in the online situation?
Well, with the majority of people, they probably act in the same way in both situations. But it's still interesting to know that this algorithm is saying that you're an extroverted person and maybe you think you're an introverted person, because decisions are going to be made on that basis in future. So advertising will be shown to you, dating app websites will be making predictions about you based on just your online data. So knowing what your online persona is and can give you insights into why are these decisions being made for me.
Increasingly inferring personality from social data. How can that play out in the construction of a new big data-driven framework for human behavior?
Most personality questionnaires at the moment are theory-driven. So a very expert and a very prestigious researcher sits down and says, I think these are the personality traits that are important for understanding behavior. And then they come out with, the Jungian types or whatever system they come out with. But it is theory-driven. It's someone looking at the personality literature and saying, I think this is what's important. What the big data could tell us is if we can analyze it in the right way, maybe there are some small but very important things that affect people's behavior that we just never have thought of before. So one example, people know that love is quite important in their lives, but love is not measured in personality questionnaires. So maybe that kind of information could come from the big data to let us understand that it's quite a specific concept, but it's actually very useful for predicting what people do in the real world.
Being employed by a business school in Cambridge, how can a business school benefit from your type of research?
So the business school here knows that companies that they're working with have more and more data about customers, about staff, about policy in general, so large groups of citizens. And they also know that they're teaching business leaders, they're teaching government employees how to make decisions that affects all of us. So then what those people need now is an understanding of, can they make some of these decisions based on the big data? How can they leverage the existing big data that's there to help them to make better decisions? What kind of analysis could they be doing that they haven't even dreamed of being able to do from the data, such that then they can make business decisions driven by data rather than by their hunches, or even the best expert is going to have a limited understanding of the full range of customers that might exist. We're all limited by our experiences, but if you've got big data on all of the customers that you've got, then algorithms can give you that kind of overview that an individual person finds very difficult.
Can you elaborate on the shift in data collection from transactional sources to social ones?
So I think both forms of data are useful. The interesting thing about social data is it's what people want to tell each other. And I think that's why it's so good at predicting personality, because it's a bit like a bumper sticker. You're trying to make a statement about yourself, and that's why you're trying to share your personality with other people, and you're saying that this is important to me. Transactional data is what people are actually doing, so what they're searching for, what they're buying. So it can tell you kind of more almost secretive things that people don't necessarily tell each other so often, or also more sort of boring things that they don't bother to tell each other because why would I tell my friend that I just bought washing up liquid? So I think both forms of data are useful, and both forms of data will continue to be useful. It depends what kinds of question you're asking. Are you asking questions about what individuals think about themselves, or are you asking questions, what are individuals actually doing, and can that tell us more about themselves than maybe they even realize?
How can people themselves benefit from the personality information that is available about them?
So one thing that we are encouraging companies to do, and also individuals to do, is to have an understanding of what predictions are being made about them based on the data that exists. So that's why we've got the Applied Magic Source website, where you can go to the site log in and see what predictions we would have made about you based on your Facebook data. But we're also encouraging companies to, when they're personalizing your search results or when they're showing you advertising, it would be really good if those companies are actually saying, we think you're this kind of person and that's why you're seeing this advertising, or you've done this in the past and that's why you're seeing these search results. Okay. So more transparency and more understanding of what predictions are being made can, number one, make individuals feel more comfortable with what's happening, and number two, also give them more understanding of what's happening.
What measures do businesses take to increase trust with customers whose information they use?
So the trouble is, right now, is businesses kind of lurch from crisis to crisis, because something comes out in the media, Facebook are doing this with my data, and then that becomes a media story and Facebook trying to explain it. And then something else comes out, next week, and Facebook have to explain it again. So their poor PR people are, being worked overtime. But it doesn't have to be that way. If there are more kind of sharing in the first place, then I think people would realize in the vast majority of cases, although big data can be used in a very advanced way, often it's used in a very simple way. It's just, I've searched for holidays, so show me even more holidays. I bought shoes, so show me even more shoes, even though I probably don't need any more. So if companies were sharing this information, then I think the companies would benefit in the long term, because users would trust them more to be doing the things that they're doing with the data.
Why haven't businesses implemented these measures?
I think probably the reason they haven't is companies may be concerned that by telling you why or how they're targeting, then their advertisers may see that as a commercial secret. I'm targeting people between 25 and 29 and they're men and they're doing this and this, and they might be trying to hide that, but I don't think that that's the way to go forward in the long term.
How can personality and big data play out in the process of home buying?
Sure, so to me it makes a lot of sense that someone who buys a house in the first place is trying to buy a house that matches their personality. So obviously practical considerations do come in. I would like to buy a mansion, but I can't. But given the options that you have, then you make a choice that this is the best house for me, and that's probably driven by psychology. So given then that I'm selling a house in future, then the house that I'm selling, probably I've, number one, bought a house that matches me, and number two, I've done some effort to customize the house to match my personality. So the house that I'm selling is probably a house that someone like me would be more interested in buying. So there's a bit like dating, people find other people like them. You also spend a long time in your house, so people, it makes sense that they'll be searching for houses like them as well.